Good morning, everybody. What up, Ocean Point? Hey, good to see you guys. Thanks for tuning in to be a part of our Sunday morning gathering, whether you're watching this live on Sunday morning or maybe you're watching this throughout the week sometime. Thank you for being a part of this. I have a couple of helpers here with me today. My two boys are here to help me with the welcome and some initial instructions that will help us out, and hopefully it'll help you to feel engaged as well. Yes, you guys ready to get some instructions? I think you are. Okay, here's the first one. All right.
Check in on Facebook.
Yes, check in on Facebook. We love to see just the fact that we, even though we're scattered, we're gathered at the same time. All right, the next one.
Where are you watching from?
Yes, please let us know where you're watching from. It's so cool that even though we're having to be distanced, that we're watching from all over the globe, all around, and we're able to feel connected through this. All right, next one is say.
Who was watching with you?
Yes, who's watching with you? We know some of you maybe are watching with families or friends. It just helps us to all feel connected with each other when we know who is watching with you. And then lastly, if you find something on here that you find helpful, share it with others. And so hopefully that will be a way to be able to connect with everyone else. Thank you again for tuning in. To give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect this morning, we're going to have a couple of songs with our worship minister, Brady. We're going to go over to Brady. After that, then we're going to come back to me for a message. And then when I get done, we'll go back to Brady for one more song as a part of everything that we were doing this morning. So thanks again for choosing to be a part of our Ocean Point virtual gathering. Can you boys say bye?
Bye.
Bye.
It's been great worshiping with you guys. Every week we're going to sing This Is Amazing Grace. Let's sing this out. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos? Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who rules the nation with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Sing, worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. So worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Yes, conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life. Then I will be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. We're going to sing another really familiar one. Let's sing Good, Good, Good Father. Oh, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I'm the tender whisper of love in the dead of night. You tell that you're pleasing and I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, I see many searching for answers, for and wide, but I'm we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. It's so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call. Deeper still as you call. Deeper still as you call. Deeper still into love. Love, love, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am.
Hey guys, welcome back. Brady, thank you for leading us in worship, and I hope that you all were able to engage in worship in a way that maybe is starting to kind of feel normal, whether it's in your home or however the dynamic is for you to be able to engage in that way. So Brady, thank you for leading us in that way. And, you know, right now we're all, I think, adjusting in different ways. Maybe some of us better than others in the midst of this. But one of the things that has made me just incredibly encouraged, something that has made me just quite honestly proud to be a part of Ocean Point, is you guys. I've never felt more proud to be your pastor. I've never felt more proud to be a part of Ocean Point. In a season when we are not able to gather in a building, we're reminded the fact that almost every week since Ocean Point started, we've said that the church is not a building. The church is the people. The church is you. The church is me. The church is us. And during these past several weeks, we've had the opportunity to demonstrate that, to put that on display for everyone. And you guys have done that in so many ways that's put me in a position to just be like, yeah, that's my church. And I have this shirt that Randy and Jackie Powers got for me a couple years ago. And it's a shirt that I don't feel comfortable wearing out in public, because I feel like it's just this shirt that is bragging to others. But I'll show it to you guys right now. I've got it on right here. And the shirt just says, "This pastor has an awesome church." And it's true. It really is. I have an awesome church. I get to be the pastor of an awesome and amazing church. And you guys have put this on full display over the past several weeks. I put together this list of ways and things that the church has done, that you guys have done, that we have done, that has really enabled us to move outside of the walls of the church, to demonstrate to others that the church is not limited by a physical building, but it's more than that it's the people. Here's kind of a little bit of a running list of some of these things. We encouraged healthcare workers with an encouragement parade. So many of you were a part of our encouragement parade, either at Grand Island or at Newport Hospital, where we went during shift change one day, and we had the cars decorated with encouraging words on them. We were honking and cheering and just really trying to show appreciation, love for the people who are taking care of the people that we love. And even as a part of it, the Newport Daily News showed up at the hospital and took several pictures of our people during this encouragement parade. And one of the pictures that they took, it moved me. In fact, it moved so many people that the CBS Evening News even used it as a part of a bit that they did. If you didn't get a chance to see the picture, this is the picture here. Some of the healthcare workers up on one of the higher floors holding up a sign that just says, "We love you too." I don't know who you guys are here in this picture. Maybe you're watching, or maybe you're watching and you know who some of these people are. We went to go and show you appreciation. And just this reciprocation is one that really has kind of echoed throughout humanity right now, as we've tried to lean in toward each other and help each other and encourage each other. It's something that we are trying to be a bigger part of. There's so many more of these. I'm going to fire through them pretty quickly. There are Ocean Pointers who've dropped off pizzas anonymously at houses to give tired families a night off from preparing dinners. Some Ocean Pointers have given their stimulus checks to help others in need. Some have painted rocks with encouraging messages and left them on doorsteps. Some of them have had their kids write cards to others in the church that they have never met in order to brighten their day. Some have made 200 masks for the Maher Center. Some have driven by homes for birthday parades, driven into the parking lot of the YMCA for our drive-in Easter service. Incredible. Some contributed by sharing our Facebook post to create a big tip of $300 to a special delivery person who had been taking care of their elderly parent. You're going to see this video clip. And as a part of this, it really speaks to our heart as Ocean Point, where we were able to pull some resources together, and we found out about this delivery person who had been taking care of her elderly parent, and a way to just say, hey, we appreciate you. So why don't we go ahead and cut to that clip now. Thank you so much. Imagine this is kind of like a crazy life for you right now.
Every day. If you guys have your own pen to sign, I just hand sanitize my gloves.
Yes.
Everyone's super cautious, so I ask.
Absolutely.
Double check everyone first.
Okay. Now I'm curious. Just be honest. when you saw that this was an order just for a small cheese pizza? Were you kind of like, oh man,
We're taking
such
them
a
all.
small.
I've gotten
Kinda-
orders in just for llama cakes before. I'm like,
what's
that's
what's the biggest tip you've ever gotten on like a small order like this?
On a small order like that, normally only about like 2 or 5.
2 or 5?
Yeah,
So you've never gotten like a $100 tip?
big orders.
But not on a small order like this?
No, never.
You've never gotten a $200 tip?
No, not even on the big ones yet, especially with this.
Not even on the big ones? Have you ever gotten a $300 tip?
No. I think the most you get maybe off the base if you get the guys maybe like a 50 to 100. You feed 150 people.
Well, on behalf of us here at Ocean Point Christian Church
Okay, sure.
and everyone here, I would like to give you a $300
Thank you very
tip.
much. Taking care of my elderly mom too. I've been putting money in her bank every week.
Taking care of your elderly mom.
Oh yeah, almost 80. I'm trying to keep her in the house. So I give her money every week out of my paycheck so that way she's got food.
Well, this is kind of part of our community here.
You
We
guys are
wanted
the
to.
best.
We know that
sure that
delivery
much?
drivers right now are doing a lot.
Okay, it's $5 on the
And-
road.
And we
Okay,
just wanted to
hustling.
be able to
guys are
say, hey,
amazing.
we appreciate you.
guys
God
are
loves
amazing.
you.
You
and
sure
you're-
all this? Anyone else need it? I'm that type of person. I'm like, does anyone else need food?
No,
Ah.
I appreciate your heart, but
I'm
this
trying to
is
give my
just-
waters and canned goods to people too. Like, do you need food? I got extras in the house. You got to keep it that way. It's the only way we're gonna survive.
Yep,
It
no,
really
that is
is.
all for you.
You guys are amazing. Thank you.
You are very
I was
welcome.
actually going to put money on my mom's account tomorrow too.
There you go. Hopefully this will be a blessing for you.
Oh, I know. Trust me, I got family in Boston right now, police department, fire department, they're all quarantined now. It's getting crazy. Sister does working nursing down there. I'm glad I'm on the island. God bless you guys. Have a good one. You guys need anything else, call in.
All right, thanks. Oh man, that is the kind of stuff that I like to see more of. There's so many things that we're seeing communicated that really kind of are a drain. Those things that fill us up a little bit. We've seen Ocean Point people and individuals who bought groceries for other Ocean Point families who are in quarantine and couldn't go shopping for themselves. We've seen Ocean Point folks who have given out gift cards for groceries to families that have had their jobs impacted. We've seen some Ocean Pointers who've gone to homes early in the morning, this was around Easter time, to hide eggs before the kids got up so they could have a surprise. They would go before anyone was out and hide these eggs so that those kids could be a part of that. I mean, it's incredible that we get to be a part of something like this. And to me, that's the perfect segue into the very last part of our teaching series called Starting Point. We're in week 8 of Starting Point, so if you're just joining us for the first time, there's 7 weeks prior to this, 7 steps that build up to this, and maybe you're sitting at home and you've got some extra time and you want to binge watch some of this and be able to catch up. You can look at our app, you can listen on our app, you can listen on our website to be able to catch up to where we are today. But ultimately, we've been asking this question, who is Jesus? Because no matter where you are in a faith journey, it's a question we need to wrestle with. Is Jesus who he said he was? Was Jesus some crazy man in history who happened to stir up several followers? Is Jesus God? And so we've been wrestling that to the ground. And last week we shared a little bit about the change in the lives of those who followed Jesus as they went from not believing that he was who he said he was. When we stumble upon the very first Easter in history, Christianity is dead. There's no one waiting for Jesus. Yet those same individuals later on, they are killed. Not because of a teaching, but because of something that they said they saw. And what they said they saw was a dead man come back to life. And so I want us to pick up there, and I want us to talk about what Jesus specifically has to say about the church. And this is something that if you've been around Ocean Point for any length of time, we've talked about a couple of times, but this is the piece that puts the final chapter on the Starting Point series, that brings it all together. And so what I want us to talk about is I want us to talk about something that we see happen around the time that Jesus would be getting his learner's license. Like if they were driving back then, Jesus would have been just in that stage as an early teenager, around 13, 14 AD. And that's when we see that there is a town that gets renamed for the Roman emperor. Well, there's that picture again. for the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus has passed away, and they rename a town, a city, and they rename it Caesarea Philippi. You can even see, Caesar there within the word Caesarea, because it's named after that. And if you were to go to Caesarea Philippi today, it looks like this. Not a whole lot to do in Caesarea Philippi nowadays. As you go there, you can kind of see the ruins. But the story that I want to tell you takes place as Jesus and his disciples are approaching Caesarea Philippi. At that point, it didn't look like this. At that point, it was a hustling and bustling city that 15 or so years before had been renamed for Caesar Augustus. Now, if you remember in your history, Caesar Augustus, he was the adopted son of Julius Caesar. And there was this movement within Rome to deify Julius Caesar, to make Julius Caesar a god. And so what we see is that essentially Caesar Augustus was the adopted son of a god. In fact, you could say that Caesar Augustus was the son of a dead god. So it's in that context, it's in that setting, approaching this city that Jesus is talking to his followers, and he knows that people have been talking about him. He knows that there's a buzz about him. And he just says, hey, who do people say that I am? And they give some answers as to who they think Jesus is. Maybe he's one of the prophets that's come back to life. But then Peter speaks up. And what Peter says is profound. And what Peter says is something that we see as kind of this foundation and a promise to what we're even doing here today in your homes in the midst of a pandemic. You see, as they're approaching this city named after the son of a dead God, Peter speaks up and he answers this question: who do you say that I am? Who is Jesus? And Peter says, let me clear that background so you can see it. Peter says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus, he takes that moment and he essentially, he tells him, hey, Peter, you weren't smart enough to come up with this on your own. You're right, but my Father, God, gave you that answer. And he starts to have this little bit of a word play. And in verse 18 he says, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. And there's some wordplay here because Peter means rock, and traditionally the Catholic Church would say the rock is actually Peter himself. Traditionally, Protestant churches would say no, the rock is are the words that Peter is saying as a part of this promise, and that's what it is. But I don't want to focus on either of those today. The key piece that I think we can't miss here is what Jesus is promising when he says, and I will build my church. I will build my church. Now, most of you, many of you, I'm sure, know that Jesus didn't speak English, right? Jesus most likely spoke Aramaic, but this letter, this biography of Jesus was originally written in Greek. So the writer who's writing here, Matthew, as he's getting ready to write down and as he's recalling what happened in this moment, as Matthew is there in this moment with that group of people who are approaching Caesarea Philippi, as they're there, and he's remembering Jesus asking him this question. He's remembering this conversation. He's picturing their faces in their minds. He's remembering what Jesus said. And as he thinks about what Jesus said, he carefully chooses a Greek word to explain what Jesus said. And the Greek word that he uses is this word, ekklesia. Now, ekklesia is a word that it quite literally means it's a gathering, assembly, or a congregation. And that's one of the reasons why we say over and over again, the church is not a building. Because what Jesus says is, I will build my ekklesia. I will build my gathering. I will build my congregation in this moment, which had to be at least a little bit comical because here they are, with, no one else around them. And there's, 13 of them, including Jesus. And Jesus saying, I'm going to build my gathering, my assembly. To which, probably looking around and thinking, there's 13 of us, Jesus. Like, what do you mean your assembly, your gathering? Then later on in history, there becomes this tragedy of translation where this word that really means a gathering or an assembly or a congregation was translated into a German word, church. And the word church, it means house of the Lord. And all of a sudden, this shift takes place where it becomes there's still a kind of a holiness about it, right? There's a high level of thinking about it, but it shifts from a gathering of people to a physical building, to a physical space, the house of the Lord. Some of you might recall back from your history classes about William Tyndale as well. William Tyndale, as he's writing and he's translating the Bible from Greek into English for the first time, he comes upon this word, and he realizes, he said, oh wait, this word doesn't mean house of the Lord. And William Tyndale, he translates this as congregation. I will build my congregation. And because of this and some other things, ultimately William Tyndale is arrested and burned at the stake because of how he translated this word. But you know what? William Tyndale was right. It did mean congregation. It meant people. See, Jesus didn't predict a place. He predicted a people. He predicted a people that nothing would stop, that nothing would come against. Now, we talked about the past couple weeks about Jesus' his crucifixion, but after he rose from the dead, he left with some instructions for his followers, for this group of people, and this is some of what he said. It says Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Now think about just that statement by itself. If you were just to have any person come to you and say, all authority has been given to me, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. What an arrogant statement, right? For anyone to say that. I mean, it's arrogant unless it's true. And for those of us who are Jesus followers, we believe that when a man predicts his own death and resurrection, that everything else he has to say is true. So he says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And he says, therefore. And whenever we see this word therefore, we should always ask, what is it there for? It's this transitional, this pivot statement. So now you know that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Because of that, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Disciples, and if you're new to Christianity, this is kind of a word that usually isn't used outside of the context of Christianity or religion. One way to define this, a simplified way to define this, is just a devoted follower of Jesus. He's saying, go and make other followers of Jesus, of all nations. Not just those of us here in Jerusalem, not just those who are part of Israel, but of all nations. And again, looking around, they probably had to think, of all, there's only a few of us. How can that be of all nations? He continues, he says, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely, he leaves them this promise. It says, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. And then he leaves, right? It's almost this comical progression of events where Jesus is saying, I'm going to be with you always. Boom. And then he's gone. Like, you just said you were always, and now you left. What's happening here? What's going on? But then something incredible happened. And for the next while, we see for the next 2 years or so, that this congregation that Jesus predicted, this gathering of people, this assembly of people, the gathering grew. It did. And the movement, it moved. And within an area of about 100 miles or so north and to the south, we see that this movement starts to expand, and this movement starts to transform and change the lives of people around them. But then something happened. The movement stopped moving. The gathering stopped growing. And we don't know exactly, from God's perspective, what's going on in this moment. Scripture doesn't reveal to us, exactly what's happening. But we have to ask the question, or maybe I just have to ask the question and think, what were they thinking in this moment? Was there frustration on Jesus' part? Guys, I've spent 3 years with you. I told you to go to all nations. Maybe you misunderstood me. Maybe you thought I said all neighborhoods, right? And they're hitting every neighborhood. But here we are 2 years later, and they're still kind of within just their little area there. And so they decide to crank it up a notch. And there's this man who goes by the name Saul at that point, who later on we know as Paul. And he's zealous. He's intelligent. He's multilingual. He is someone that is feared by the church because he has taken it upon himself to go and try to stop the spread of the church, this apostate group as he would see it. And then he changes. Because then he meets the resurrected Jesus. And Paul, we see in Acts chapter 9, his life changes forever. And Paul is a problem for skeptics. Maybe you're a skeptic. You see, Paul wrote all these letters talking about things that happened and things that he saw and the people that were around Jesus. And those letters date back to around like the 50s AD. And that's problematic because that's not hundreds of years after Jesus, when legend can build up and transform and there's no one there to correct any of the teachings about what was happening. This is 20 years. 20 years. When I was younger, 20 years seemed like a long time. I just turned 40 recently, and now all of a sudden, thinking back 20 years ago, yeah, that's not really all that long ago. And to think about all the people who are still around. So as Paul is writing these letters and talking about these things, for those who are skeptics, you have to figure out how to wrestle with Paul. But Paul, he comes onto the scene. And essentially, they all gather together, Paul and all of the other apostles. And again, we don't know what the exact exchange of dialogue is, but we just see the end result. It's almost as if Paul comes into the group and says, all right, guys, we got to shake things up. We are supposed to be going to all nations. And so here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and take a list of all nations. Let's kind of maybe draw out a map. And Jerusalem. You guys see this? All right, you guys all take Jerusalem. You can divide up Jerusalem. Everything else here, I got it. It's on me. And then Paul goes and he spends the next 30 years planting churches, starting all of these baby ecclesias, these gatherings. And as he would start each one, he didn't go to them and start by talking about some of the teachings of Jesus. He didn't talk about the story of the Good Samaritan. He didn't talk about any of the miracles necessarily that Jesus performed. What he told them was about an event, a historical event, an improbable, yet he believed to be true event, that a dead man came back to life. And because of that death is no longer something to be afraid of. And he suffered extremely. He suffered more than I imagine most, if not all of us, are suffering right now. And it didn't cause him to waver in his faith, because the God that he believed in was not a God that wouldn't allow bad things to happen to good people. That was never promised. What he believed was that he worshiped a God, a Savior, a Messiah, who defeated death. And so death was no longer something to be afraid of. And when you're not afraid of death, there's not much else you can be afraid of. So Paul, he goes and he finds himself spreading all this news. And eventually he goes into Rome. He's warned not to. He shouldn't go. And he's there, and he gets arrested. And then one morning, some final morning, he's going to be taken out to be executed. And as he's taken out to be executed, he would have been taken through the Roman Forum. This is it today. You can kind of picture, imagine Paul being taken out on the final morning of his life. The last time he'll ever see sunlight before he is beheaded. And as he is taken out, wouldn't it be cool if we could just go back in time and he's being led by the Roman guard. He's taken through this sequence of tunnels and paths, and then ultimately to the place where he'll be executed. Wouldn't it be cool if you and I could just walk beside him? Just come up beside him to be able to tell him that, hey, Paul, I know right now is hard. And there might even be a piece of you that's wondering, is it worth it? There might be a piece of you that's wondering, will it work? Because right now it seems like the Roman Empire is the thing that is winning. The Roman Empire is the thing that is ultimately going to last forever. But what if we could accompany Paul as he's walking his last walk, and we're able to just tell him, hey, Paul, this city that you're walking in right now, there will be a day when it will be adorned with symbols and reminders of the life of Jesus and his followers. What if we could tell him, hey, Paul, Nero Circus right here, Nero Circus, this place where, not a circus like we would think of today, but this place where Nero, amongst other things, would take Christians and use them as human torches for his evening parties. This place that I imagine would just strike fear in the mind of every Christian and every follower. What if we were able to say, Paul, Nero Circus, you see Nero Circus right there? There will be a time when it will be the site of one of the most significant structures in the world, St. Peter's Basilica. One that some people will, claim to even be one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful buildings in the world. Named after your friend, Peter. And someday, Paul, people will come here to the city. Some people will come here to Rome. And when they come here, they're not going to come to visit the tombs of Nero or Caesar Augustus. And instead, they will ask, hey, can you show us where the Apostle Paul was imprisoned? Can you show us where Peter is buried? One day, crosses will adorn buildings. And these crosses won't be there as a reminder of the execution method of crucifixion in general. No, these crosses will adorn buildings throughout the city to remind us of one single crucifixion. And one day, there will be no more Roman Empire, Paul, but there will be ecclesias across this entire globe in places that you've never even heard of. And Paul, the letters that you've spent so much time writing, one day, they'll be translated into more than 1,200 languages so that people can know and learn from the things that you saw and the things that you experienced. Your writing was not in vain. And Paul, one year, people all over the world will read the name Caesar Augustus but they won't read it in connection with any of his great deeds, but they will read it because he was the emperor at Jesus' birth. And Paul, someday, people will name their sons Peter and Paul, and they'll name their dogs Julius and Nero. It had to be unimaginable to Paul in that moment. What he was experiencing, what he had experienced in his life, it had to seem impossible. But that's exactly what happened. Just as Jesus predicted. Jesus made a promise, and God has fulfilled that promise just as he did to Abraham and Israel. He didn't blink. Because you see, he said, I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my ecclesia. I will build my gathering. I will build my congregation. And even the gates of Hades, even the gates of death will not overcome it. Nothing can stop this movement. Not even death can stop this movement. And we're here today, sitting where you're sitting, standing where you're standing, as evidence, as proof to the fulfillment of this promise. You see, the gathering didn't stop gathering. The movement didn't stop moving. The gathering didn't stop growing. Instead, it spread throughout the entire world. That's how we got to be here today. That's how you got to be where you are at. So I want to wrap up this entire series. I want to wrap up this message by simply asking you a question. What is my next step? That's the question I want you to ask yourself. What is my next step? For some of you, maybe you've been journeying and you've been wrestling, but you've never decided to declare that Jesus is who he said he was. That he is God. He is the Son of God. He is the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one, the chosen one, the one who was set apart to be able to save humanity from ourselves. And so maybe this morning as you're sitting there, this is the time to finally make that declaration. Maybe it's time to make that declaration and surrender your life in baptism. Quite honestly, I don't even know how we do that right now. But I do know this, that on that very first birthday or the very first day of the church, when people cried out to Peter and said, what must we do? He said, you must repent, make a 180 in your life and be baptized. And this idea of when we're baptized, we are connecting, it's not just this personal thing, but we are connecting with followers of Jesus for 2,000 years. Billions of other people of all different kinds of ethnicities and languages and walks of life, that we are connecting with them and declaring that Jesus is who he said he was. And we're connecting with Jesus in a way that we can't any other way. You see, when we are baptized through immersion, we go into the water. The Bible tells us that we go in, and it's like my computer's going to sleep here. Let me see if I can get this back up. All right. Well, you saw the last thing there. I'll get dragons off the TV here. But when we go down into the water, it's like we are dying, just like Jesus died, and we are being buried. And when we come up out of the water, we're being born again. We're being resurrected in the same way that Jesus was. And so maybe it's that time. And there's nothing special about the water. All we know is we just need enough water to be able to be immersed. And so, we've not really talked about this at all, even as a staff or as a leadership. For those of you who want to be baptized, I know we have to continue to practice physical distancing, social distancing as a part of this. But if that's a decision that you need to make and something you need to do, let us know. We will figure it out. Maybe it's time for you to jump in and connect and be a part of Ocean Point. I don't even really know what that looks like now. Normally we'd have greeters and welcomers and people who help to pass communion trays and people who are cleaning the building, all these different kinds of things. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's time for you to jump in and serve. Maybe it's time to get connected into a group where we're working out some of the details to get our new online group set up for this next season. So maybe it's time for you to get plugged into that and you just kind of watch and wait for that. Maybe it's time to financially invest in what's going on as a part of Ocean Point, to be a part of what God is doing in that long list of things. Maybe it's time. So as you sit there, as you ponder, it's time to answer that question. Who is Jesus?
Do you feel the world is broken? We do. Do you feel the shadows deepen? We do. But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? We do. Do you wish that you could see it all made new? We do. Is all creation groaning? It is. Is a new creation coming? It is. Is the glory of the Lord to be the light within our midst? It is. Is it good that we remind ourselves of this? It is. Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave, he is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slain. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy of this? He is. Does the Father truly love us? He does. Does the Spirit move among us? He does. And does Jesus, our Messiah, hold forever those he loves? He does. Does our God intend to dwell again with us? He does. Is anyone worthy? Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave, he is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slain from every people and tribe and every nation and tongue. He has made us a kingdom and priests to God to reign with the Son. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy? Is he worthy? Is he worthy of this? He is. Is he worthy? Is he worthy? He is. He is.
Hey guys, thanks again for tuning in and being a part of our virtual gathering. As we wrap up, I wanted to go over our stats. I know last week we tried to share our typical stats slide that we would share on a Sunday morning but because of some technical issues, you couldn't see it or know what was there. But I thought it would also be helpful to kind of explain a little bit of some of those stats that are there. So here is our up-to-date stats slide. Sunday's attendance, so this is last week, 470. And you might wonder, how do we come up with that number? It is an imperfect science, I'll tell you that. So what we've done is we look at our Facebook Live, those people who are watching live during the service. And we know that through different things, we've calculated that on average, there's about 2.5 people per device that are watching at that time. So we only look at those who are watching live. We multiply that times 2.5. That gives us the general number. And then we add on the number of people who are watching from the kids' perspective, but just by one for those, if that makes any sense. It's an imperfect science again, and we don't count those who maybe go and watch later on, but it just gives us a general idea of who's kind of engaging with us live in the moment. And then you can see last week's giving, like we typically have, projected weekly need. And then you can see, just like almost every industry business, maybe even your own personal budget, the 2020 giving and the 2020 budget needs a significant gap there with that. But I want you to know, just like you're trying to figure out either within your own business or your own personal finances how to shrink that gap, we're doing the same. And so we've tried to do everything we can in order to pull back and only pay for the things that absolutely have to be paid for within our operating budget. So we've been able to take this 13,925 and cut it down, whittle it down, but it's a moving target because depending on how long we stay in quarantine, how long we're not able to physically gather, that changes. So we don't really know exactly how to fully report this number, just in full transparency. We're trying to understand that, but based on kind of the initial projected needs, this is where we're at. This is our total giving for Greater, those of you who've given towards that. And I'm excited to tell you that even in spite of all of the craziness, we have still given over $20,000 to missions, to support missionaries both within the States and missions overseas as well. So thank you guys for continuing to be a part of our Ocean Point family. Thank you for giving, and we are here with you. We're praying for you, especially if you're one of the ones who's been impacted and maybe your finances aren't what they used to be. We get it. We feel it. For the rest of you, maybe you've had difficulty transitioning the ways of giving. I know we've fielded lots of questions, and the easiest thing is, if you used to give on site, is just to give online. You can use the app or go to our website to be able to do that. I miss you guys. I love you guys. I can't wait until we're able to gather together in person again. Have a great Sunday.